Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Chullin daf Lamites Chullin 39. We're going to start on Lamites Amid Aleph on the third line. Gemara says Idmar, and Gemara is going to cite a case and then connect it back to our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Idmar Shochet es habehimo is rok dama avodas kochavim. If a person does a shlita, he slaughters an animal. We're not talking about a carbon here. Talking about a regular animal, but he has in mind to sprinkle the blood for idolatry. Meaning he does the shlita, he wants to eat the meat, but he wants to sprinkle the blood for idolatry or to burn the fats for idolatry. Now, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Omer Psua, Reish Lakish Amar Meteres. Rabbi Yochanan says it's disqualified. Rashi says even to have benefit from it. Reish Lakish says Muteres. That it's not that it's allowed to do this. Tosfos points out that he's liable for death, but rather the animal is permitted. The animal is permitted either b'shlita or benefit. But anyway, this is a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psua, he says it's disqualified because mechazrin me'avoda avoda v'yafino chutz mipnim. We're going to connect this to a dispute we have in Zvachim. Rabbi Yochanan says that if you slaughter, when you're thinking about one avoda, if you're talking about kachim, if you're thinking about one avoda while you're doing another avoda, let's say you thought about shchita, while you're doing the shchita, you thought about the sprinkling of the blood, that's going to be considered machshava for idolatry. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan is saying, machashim avoda. So even though you're doing the shchita, but you're thinking about the zrika, we're going to consider that it's going to be problematic and it's effective, so to speak, in a negative manner. The thought about the zrika while you're doing the shlita, and we're going to learn this concept from a law from the Beis Hamikdash, which is we're going to learn out the prohibition of idolatry from the law of pigol inside the Beis Hamikdash, because if you shecht with the intent to sprinkle the blood the next day or to bring the emur the next day, that's pigol. So basically, it's effective to have your thoughts about an avoda, a different avoda than the one you're doing. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. It's going to be prohibited to have benefit from. Reish Lakish, however, says muteres because he says it's allowed. That the shchita is going to be allowed because he says. The reason is he's saying we're not going to say that we go from one avoda to another avoda. We're not going to look at to think about the zrika while we're doing the shlita. It's not going to be effective since we're doing the shlita to any thoughts about the zrika, and because we're not learning out the laws of idolatry from the laws of kachim, which are inside the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yochanan, so now goes deeper. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula, Reish Lakish Amar Ksher. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula. Because we learned, and the Azdu Tamau. So the Gemara says they both follow their logic because we learned, and this is from Zvachim. Shochta Lishma. Let's say and Rash says we're talking about a carbon chatas here. Let's say because that's what requires Lishma. You slaughtered the sin offering for the purpose of the chatas. Lizrok Dama Lishma, but to sprinkle the blood. With the intent of not doing it for the chatas. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula, Rabbi Yochanan says it's disqualified. Reish Lakish Amar Ksher. Reish Lakish says it's still kosher. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula, Mechaj me avoda, because since we're doing from the chatas, even though we're doing the shchita, whatever your thoughts about this week are relevant. V'gamrinan mimilcheves pigol. Just like by pigol, it's effective. So too, it's going to be effective by the chatas, from the shchita to the zrika, for shalol lishma. Whereas Reish Lakish Amar Kshera, he says it's kosher because ein mechasher me'avoda la'avoda. Says we don't v'lo gamrina me'achshavas pigol. He's going to say we're not going to learn out from the chatas, from shchita to zrika, from pigol. So utzricha, we need them to teach these cases both by the case of avoda zara and also by the case of the chatas. Why? Why do we need both cases? The in marbaha, because if we only had it in the case of the avodah zarah. If we only had a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, we would say, "But how come Rish Lakish?" That's where Rish Lakish says it's kshera or muteres mishum the chutz mipnim yalfinon, because we're not going to learn out the law of avodah zarah from kodshim. Aval panim mipanim b'chatas from pigol emamodoy. Maybe he'd say we learn out the law of the chatas from the law of pigol. So there, maybe you would agree with Rabbi Yochanan. And if we only had it by the case of chatas and pigol, we would say Bahi kam Rabbi Yochanan. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says it's disqualified. Aval baha. But in the case of the avodas kochavim, ema model Reish Lakish. Maybe we would agree with Reish Lakish that it's permitted. So Masav Rav Sheshes. So now Rav Sheshes comes back and challenges this. Rav Sheshes is going to challenge Rabbi Yochanan from our Mishnah, because what do we said in our Mishnah yesterday that if somebody slaughters an animal for an idolater, the shlita is kshera, but Rabbi Eliezer says it's disqualified, and the reason is because we're going to say that the stam machshava of an idolater is for idolatry, whereas Rabbi Yossi comes along and he says no, kal v'chomer advarim. It's not just like in the case where you by kodshim, where we say the only thing that matters is the person who does the avodah. So, and that's where a place where the machshava is poseles, and it only goes by the one who does the avodah, and not by the owner of the korban. So too, in our case, for sure, everything should go after the shochet and not for the idolatry. So Rabbi Yossi argues with Rabbi Eliezer. Now let's go back to our Gemara and let's see how Rav Sheshes says this is a question. Masav Rav Sheshes, Amar Rabbi Yossi, kal v'chomer umah b'makom shemachshava poseles b'muktashin. Just like in a case where machshava disqualifies by hektish, we say eina kol cholech ela achar ha'oved. We say there it only follows the one who does it and not the owner of the korban. Makom she'im machshava poseles b'chulin. A case where we say b'chulin, your intent, generally speaking, does not disqualify. Makom she'ein machshava poseles b'chulin. A case where your intent does not disqualify. Eino din shelo yakol holech ela achar hashochet. For sure, it should only follow after the shochet, and so therefore it shouldn't be disqualified if you slaughter for an idolater. So what does it mean? Ma'ein machshava poseles b'chulin. So the Gemara analyzes, it's building up its question. What does it mean that machshava does not disqualify by chulin? What does that mean? If you want to say that intent is not able to disqualify anything by chulin, that can't be. We know that if you slaughter a korban for idolatry, it's prohibited. So if you say intent does not disqualify, how is it going to be disqualified? Ela pshita me avoda avoda. So it must be that what we're talking about here is. So it must be that what we're talking about here is that if it's from one avoda to another avoda by chulin, it's not going to disqualify. That's what he's referring to. And this is what Rabbi Yossi is saying back to Rabbi Eliezer. Uma b'makom shemachshava poseles b'muktashin me avoda avoda ina kol holech ela achar ha'oved. That just like in the case of kodshim, where we say that the machshava is going to disqualify from one avoda to another avoda by pigol, we say that the only one who starts disqualify is the one who does the korban itself. Makom she'ein machshava poseles b'chulin me avoda ela ba'osa avoda. The case by chulin, where it only the thoughts do not disqualify from one avoda to another. They only disqualify within that avoda. Eino din shlo yakol holech ela achar hashochet. For sure, the whole law should follow the shochet. So therefore, we see from here that this is going to be a question. Panim kasha l'Reish Lakish and chutz kasha l'Rabbi Yochanan. So basically, we have a question on pnim against Reish Lakish and a question on chutz according to Rabbi Yochanan, because from the basis of our Gemara, our Mishnah is saying that that we are mechashev me'avoda avoda inside the base by kodshim. And also we see from here that according to Rabbi that we say that you're not mechashev from avoda avoda outside the base of Mikdash. So it's a question b'fnim on Reish Lakish and a question b'chutz on Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara says bishlam apanim or Reish Lakish al kasha. So we could say Reish Lakish, it's not a question. Hamik made the shamim Rabbi Yochanan. Halabatzar the shamim Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish heard these Mishnayos from Reish Lakish, and so when he said that you're not mechashem avoda avoda even bifnim, that was before he heard this Mishnah. Meaning to say, it was before he knew the Mishnah. But after he knew the Mishnah, he said, okay, yeah, you're mechashev bifnim, but not b'chutz. But but according to Rabbi Yochanan, he said that outside the base of Mikdash we are machashem avoda avoda, and here it's clear that you're not. So the Gemara says, "Who most of who mefarkos," or if Sheshus raised this question, who answered it? Ba'arba avodos. That which we said, machshava does not disqualify b'chulin. It doesn't mean. I'm reading Rashi. It only refers to the arba avodos. V'achli kamar uma b'makom shemachshava poselas b'mukdashin ba'arba avodos. Just like inside the base of mikdash, that your thought disqualifies within those four avodos. Eina kol cholech ela achara oved. That we only follow the one who does the avoda itself, meaning to say not the bailim. Makom she'ein machshava poselas b'chulin on top of lamatasam base. A place where by chulin it is only disqualifying ela b'shtei avodos by two of the four avodos. By Rashi says by shchita and the sprinkling of the blood because it has the pasuk. But by Kabbalah on halacha it doesn't say that there is idolatry, so therefore so that's the logic. So it's not about mechashem me'avoda avoda. So Rabbi Yochanan would say that Rabbi Yossi is not saying that there's no machshava avoda from outside the base of Mikdash. So Tanya Kavasi to Rabbi Yochanan. So there's a brayso like Rabbi Yochanan who says we're mechashev me'avoda avoda even outside the base of Mikdash, because it says hashochet asabehema lizrok damo avodas kachavim. Let's say you slaughter an animal and your intent was to sprinkle the blood for idolatry. That's going to be considered like you brought it for idolatry, and it's disqualified. But let's say you slaughtered it, and then after the shchita, you had the thought about it to sprinkle its blood or to bring its fats for idolatry. This was a incident in Caesarea, and they didn't give a ruling to allow it or to prohibit it or to allow it. Amar Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda explains, the reason why they didn't want to prohibit it, mishum kvoda de rabbanan, because of the honor for the rabbanan. Because remember we said on Lamachas Amabeis that if you slaughter for idolatry, it's kshera. So the rabbanan said it's kshera under those for an idolater, it's kshera. So to here also that the rabbanan want to say as a baseline, it's kosher. Because he didn't have, if we don't know specifically beforehand that was his thought. But they also, lo heter, they didn't want to allow it, mishum kvoda de Rabbi Eliezer, because of the honor for Rabbi Eliezer, who said that the stam of an idolater is for idolatry. So the Gemara says, the Gemara challenges this, why do we say this? Maybe the Rabbanan only say in general that the stam machshava of an idolater is not for idolatry, because we didn't hear after the fact what his intent was. But here after the fact that we heard afterwards, the chashiv, in Caesarea, I just want to clarify that they slaughtered this animal for a Jew. A Jew is the one who did this slaughter. And so, but in this case, but here, where after the fact we say what his intent was, that proves that the whole time was for idolatry. Maybe the Rabbanim will be strict in this case. Or alternatively, Adkan will come Rabbi Eliezer, or maybe Rabbi Eliezer only says it's disqualified in general over there. Because in general, the baseline of an idolater is to worship idolatry. Yisrael, but if it's in our case over here in Kesari, but we're going to say, but here that the slaughterer is a Jew. And we're not worried that he's an idolater from the outset. It was only afterwards that we had this thought of Yisrael. But in this case, of Yisrael, we wouldn't say that, from the fact that afterwards he became an idolater, we wouldn't say that from the outset he was also an idolater. So therefore, Amrav Shizri, Omru Baheter Mishum Kvodo de Rashbag. So the reason why they didn't allow that animal where in Kesari, where they slaughtered the animal and afterwards the person said he said that it was for idolatry, that the reason why they didn't allow it is because of the honor of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would prohibit in this case. So which Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? Hi, Rashbag. So now the Gemara is going to look for where Rashbag would say that a similar case like this is prohibited. Ilema Rashbag the Gittin. If you want to say it's the Rashbag about Gittin, the Tanan we learned in Meseches Gittin Daf Samach Vav Medalef. Habari, a person who's healthy who says Shamar Kisvu Gel Ishti. He says right to get for my wife, and then what Rashi says that we have to say that he gave the get, that he gave it to an agent who gave the get to the wife. But he never actually said give it, but they gave it. So in that case, we say he didn't necessarily intend to give it, so he was just playing around with her, he's torturing her. And so she's not divorced. But let's say the one time there was a healthy person, Shamar Kisvu Gel Ishti, he said, write a get for my wife. He went up on the roof and he fell off and he died. And Amar Rashbag, if he fell on his own, meaning he took his own life, harez a get. Then we can assume that it was a get, because really his intent was to give her the get. He didn't want her to have to fall to Yibum with his brother, and so therefore he wanted to give her the get. And so we're going to say that this was his intent the whole time. So, but if the wind pushed him off, ain't no get. If the wind pushed him off, it's not a get. But you say, is this incident refuting what we said? We just said it's not a get. And why do you say if he fell off on his own, it's a get? So we explain, you have to fill in the text. So if his final actions prove what his initial actions were, hareze get. Then we're going to say it's a get. So we see from here from this teaching in Rashbag that the final actions prove the context of the earlier actions. The Gemara says that's not a proof till Mashani Hasam. Maybe that case is different because the person actually said something at the beginning. Damar Kisfu. Since he said something at the beginning, maybe that's why in that case it's not going to be. That's why we allow his final actions to prove something. So we're going to say it's because of the kvodo of Rashbag of Hacha, the Tanya. Is the person who wants to give his assets to another person as a gift, but he has heirs. And now, so he says, I'm going to give it to my friend as a gift. The friend doesn't want it necessarily because there are avadim in there are slaves in there, and the Gemara says elsewhere, somebody who acquires a slave, he's acquired an owner because a lot of responsibility. So we say, he wants to give his assets to others. And there were slaves in there. And the person who's getting it says, I don't want them. Rabo Sheni Kohen, if the person he was giving it to was a Kohen, then we assume that he got them, and those slaves can eat truma, because a slave can eat the truma if he's owned by a Kohen. Reb Shpag Omer Kivan Shamar Hala Yavshibayan. Once he says I don't want them, Kfar Zachubayan Yorshin. The heirs already got them, and so then they can't eat the truma. Tanakama. So he says the Tanakama says if he says I'm giving it to my friend, and his friend is a Kohen, and he says I don't want it, how could he get it? Doesn't make sense. Even if he's sitting there screaming, I don't want it. So I'm a rabbi, v'tema Rabbi Yochanan. But tzavach meikar, if he shouted at the beginning, I don't want to call you, everybody would say there, in those cases, he has not acquired it because he said right out from the outset, I don't want it. If he was quiet in the end, he screams that I don't want it. Everybody would say he acquires it there because once he acquired it, he can't say later on, I don't want it. Where is there a dispute between Rashbag and the Tanakama? That somebody else accepted it for him. The friend had somebody else accept it for him. And he was quiet. In the end, he screamed out. Tanakama says from the fact he was quiet when his friend got it for him, that means he acquired it. He's now trying to get rid of it, but that doesn't work. Rashbag says, no, his concluding actions prove his initial actions. And the reason why he didn't shout out from the beginning, well, since it hasn't yet come into my hands, why should I bother screaming out? So we see from here that Rashbag says that your concluding actions prove what your initial actions were. So I'm Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel, halacha Rabbi Yossi. The law is like Rabbi Yossi. What did Rabbi Yossi say? Rabbi Yossi said, go back to Lamed Ches, Amud Beis in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi said that it follows the shochet and not the idolater. So that's what we say here, that the animal of an idolater that a Jew slaughtered is permitted because we say only the slaughter of the shochet is what disqualifies, not the intent. Only the intent of the shochet is what disqualifies, not the intent of the idolater. So that's what we say the law is like Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, Hanutaye, there were these Arabs, the Asu Tzikunya, they came to Tzikunya. Yav Dichra Tabacha Yisrael. They gave their rams to the Jewish butcher. Amr Lahu, he said to them, they said to him, so Amruam, the Arabs said to the Jewish butchers, they said, Dama v'tarba l'didan, mashcho bisra l'didaycho. They said, we're going to get the fat and the blood for our idolatry, and you're going to take the hide and the meat. So Shocha Rav Tuvi Barav Masno Kamei Rav Yosef Ki Agavnamai. What's the law in this case? Do we say that the thought process of the Arabs that they're thinking about the fat and the blood for idolatry prohibits the animal, or do we say since the shochet is a Jew, it's not disqualified? Shalchu Hachiyam Rav Yehuda Mashmuel Lachol Rav Yossi. Well, it's like Rav Yossi that their intent is not going to be problematic since they are not the slaughterer, so we follow the Jewish slaughterer. Amar way. Ravacha Braid Ravadi or Ravachu Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it says that the Malshava idolatry disqualifies the shechita of a Jew, even if the non-Jew has a small portion of the animal, we have a question. If the non-Jew gave some money to the Jewish butcher and he says, when you slaughter the animal, give me some of the meat, what will be the law? We have to look at this non-Jew. If the non-Jew is a strong man and the Jew would not be able to push him off and to just give him back the money, then the non-Jew has acquired it, and according to Rabbi Eliezer, would be disqualified. But if he's not, if he's not strong, the Jew could push him off. He could say to him, Reishech Vahar. Hit your head against the mountain, or take your money back. So this is an expression, Reishech Lahar. It's like the expression it's like the expression pound sand, meaning to say, take your head and take this mountain and strike it against each other, or get your money back. Meaning to say, if the Jew could push him off, it's like the idolater doesn't really own it in the first place. And so, so that's today's daf. Yomi Baruch Hashem. That's today's daf, and we'll pick it up again later.
Thank you.
Thank you.